afternoon and welcome back to GSA Executives Podcast with your host, Caitlin Tai. And today we've got on Jitinder Takhar. It's great to have you on.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you for asking me.
You had a busy day today, or has it been?
It has been quite busy. So I've been listening to a webinar on AI and impact it can have on social housing. And it's absolutely fascinating. And I think it's an irresistible direction of travel.
Oh, definitely. Well, AI is going to be involved with everything, not just construction and property and engineering, but everyday life. So
yeah. And we're probably already using AI. I know somebody told me that the only way he found out he was talking to a chatbot at the end of a conversation was when the chatbot said, "I'm now going to refer you to one of my human colleagues."
And they thought they were talking to it. So, oh, right, okay, they're responding quicker than me.
So that was really, that's how much they absolutely look and sound like us.
Yeah. And they're only going to get kind of even more intelligent by the day. So
Scarlett Johansson was complaining about it today, wasn't she?
Oh.
About how they're using her voice in an AI apparatus that she doesn't particularly like. And it sounded very much like her.
Yeah, because I guess it would be kind of, if you're impersonating someone and if they say something and it's something bad, for example, then see, the real person could get the blame for it rather than the AI. Oh gosh.
Yeah. So as we said this morning earlier on, the fact that it kind of improves itself every 23 days or something like that, that's phenomenal on one side, a little bit scary on the other.
Slightly worrying, but exciting.
Exciting, nevertheless.
Exactly. So to kind of introduce yourself a little bit, could you explain why you chose to pursue a career in the housing sector?
That's a really good question to put to people from the housing profession, because it used to be that the answer was, I just fell into it. And I've always found that a little bit odd. I didn't fall into it. I chose it as a career. I did take my time in finding my career. I was at university for quite a while until I was 27. And then I'd finished and I was working as a refuge worker, acting as an advocate for women escaping domestic violence. And I was their voice because sometimes they just, as I went to the housing office with them, they just weren't listened to. I just realised how important a safe home was for these women and their children, and how important the home was. And that propelled me into pursuing my housing career. So I didn't fall into it. I had an early introduction in a first job and then realised the absolute importance of it and how it impacts people's lives and the difference it makes between succeeding and thriving and not.
Definitely. Well, to have a roof over your head, a lot of people do take for granted. So the fact that you're able to help people be able to do that, especially kind of people who've potentially come from domestic abuse, things like that, it's a really great thing that you're doing.
Thank you.
So could you give me a brief background on how you've achieved the position that you're in today?
It is a little bit connected to arriving at my career choice in my mid to late 20s rather than straight after university. So I was a little bit more mature. Right. I was kind of the mature student equivalent of going into the employment market.
Didn't want to leave university. You liked education too much.
I did like education too much, and it was a great life. But eventually I did end up looking for work and entering into this particular industry. And as I said, because I was a bit more mature, I was then able to just appraise it with a little bit more of a mature outlook. And I can remember looking and thinking, wow, I'm sure things could be done a little bit better. Now that sounds really, really arrogant, but it was also the voice of a fresh pair of eyes that had a little bit of experience behind them and was able to think, I think I can make a bigger difference. So that's what propelled me in my career choices. And I started off as a housing officer. So I had my grounding in providing housing services to women escaping domestic violence. Then it was to a wider community of people who needed shelter and safe and affordable homes. And I was dealing with everything from maintenance to tenancies to antisocial behaviour to neighbour disputes to people wanting to take advantage of grants to move out and buy their own homes. So that made me think, actually, with my more mature outlook, I think I can actually bring a little bit more to this particular narrative. And I then went into a development career.
Yeah.
So that's the supply side of it. And I really wanted to put more homes into the whole supply side of housing. And I never forgot that customer piece. I never forgot the woman I took to the housing office. In all of that, whatever I have done, I'll remember those women, and they ground me and they make me think of what it is I'm actually creating and providing, and who it's for, and what its purpose is.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me. And I wanted to, I'll make no bones about it, I wanted to get into a position where I can bring all of those values to bear in a much wider way on an organisation.
Well, as you say, kind of, you want to be able to speak for those people. And now that you're in the position that you're in, it does give you the voice to be able to do that. And the fact that you're remembering kind of the core reason why you wanted to do it is great. And obviously it's really helping those people who you kind of started your career kind of working with. So that's great. It's a full circle moment, isn't it? So what would you say is the toughest decision you've had to make during your professional career?
There is one very low moment, and it was a moment, and I can remember it very clearly, and it made me cry at the time. And it was during the 2007-8 banking crisis. So we'd just completed a successful merger with an organisation. Part of the promised outputs is that we combine our strengths on our financial resources and all our skills and experience, and we could do even more than we had been. And then the crisis hit, and we all had to make severe cuts.
Yeah, of course.
And of course, in my sphere of development, that is kind of resource hungry.
Yeah.
And because those resources were then taken away, we didn't have the ability to sustain all of these people and all of their employment. So I had to halve the team, and it was devastating. It was, I'm not talking about me, it's devastating for the people I work with, because we had chosen our merger partner really wisely.
Yeah.
We looked at everybody who was out there. These were the best people to merge
You
with.
were all excited for this new kind of prospect,
And then it was just the rug was pulled from underneath our feet, and it was, okay, and now you have to halve the numbers. And that was that probably is the toughest decision I've ever made, because how do you choose between fantastic person number one and fantastic person number two?
Exactly.
You can't. And it is, and so it was so hard. And I'll never forget one of the ladies I was talking to, and I just started to cry, and I said, I'm sorry, I really don't want to lose you, but I have to. And she actually reached out over the table to me and said, don't worry, I'll be okay.
Oh, bless her.
And that, again, it's something that it's just kind of engraved indelibly on your mind. You just don't forget moments like that. So it reinforces how I work with people and how I value people around me, and how I want to see them as people. They're not just staff. They're people with homes and lives and dreams and hopes. So, it's just treating people with that same respect and value.
Well, the fact that one of your employees was able to comfort you in a time like that, when obviously she was having to be let go, that it obviously goes to show how much of an amazing leader that you are. So.
It was her amazing moment and not my greatest. But yes, it's one of the it's what you get out of people, what you put in.
100%. Yeah.
And yes, these were fantastically loyal, tremendously skilled people.
And so, kind of on a happier note, what would you say your greatest achievement is?
Okay, I do have a tendency to kind of just skip over.
Yeah, a lot of people go like, "Sit. Oh well, I've done well at this." I think
it's kind of it's a very British thing, isn't it? If I was American, I might own it a bit more. I think I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is keeping that customer focus, the tenant focus, at the centre of everything I do. And when I entered the world of development. So after my first job as housing officer, I got the opportunity, which is rare as hen's teeth, to become a development officer.
Yeah.
And I took that. I mean, this is meant to be an area where you're a little bit divorced from the end user, the tenant, the customer. But with the way I had navigated the housing world to that date, I decided that actually we were going to involve the customer. So we ended up setting up what was an annual conference, and we would invite people who'd moved into our homes and wider tenant groups to look at the designs that we had produced and tell us, did they work or did they not?
Mm-hmm.
And it's testament to the fact how much we listened that by the time I left that organisation, we were on version 18 of that design. So it shows you, okay, we did listen, and it's quite a job to change designs and get your contractor supply chain to understand that, especially if they're used to one way of operating.
Yeah.
But we'd involve them in the conferences as well, and would say, look, listen to the horse, it's coming from the horse's mouth. This is what works. And for an example, we'd be asking people, well, what do you think of our lovely living room stroke dining rooms?
Yeah.
And inevitably, people with children would come back and go, no, I prefer a kitchen diner so I can keep an eye on it when I'm cooking.
Yeah.
And we changed that design. And another area was we always want windows in bathrooms.
Mm-hmm.
That can be quite hard to do, but there's a reason why people want windows in bathrooms. So version 18. And that annual conference, I was talking to somebody. So bear in mind that I started in this place in 2003.
Yeah.
And it is now 2024, 21 years later. There is a version of that conference that goes on in the Southwest, because when I was doing that conference, it ended up with 14 organisations from across the Southwest coming together. We were all part of a much larger development consortium.
Mm-hmm.
And that is still going on.
Oh, fantastic.
So that direct conduit to the end user, listening to them. And I'm a very firm believer that just listening to your customer, actually, it's not rocket science, it's good for business. If you get it right first time, because you're giving them what they want, then you haven't got it wrong.
Yeah.
So you're not wasting your time and resources, and you can just improve your performance. And the more you improve, the more your customer tenant likes it.
Exactly.
The more they like it, the more you've got time to improve. So it's a virtuous cycle, and it just makes common sense to listen to what it is people want. Every good business does that.
Well, I think one of the best things in kind of any relationship is communication, and having that, whether it be in your personal life or within business, if you know what that other person wants, as I say, it's a much smoother flow, reducing costs and everything like that as well. So hopefully everyone's happy, even if it does take 18 times. By the 18th time, there we go, you've got it. Whereas it obviously could have taken a lot longer, or never have been exactly what they wanted. So
would never have given really good satisfaction levels, which is, at the end, our homes, we were getting satisfaction levels where people were telling us, love it. You've just given me what I wanted.
And to hear that must just be amazing.
Job done.
Yeah, even it takes away, it makes you forget about the stressful days kind of leading up to it, doesn't it? So that's brilliant to hear. So you were previously chief executives at Homes for Lambeth. What was the most important qualities, would you say? What are the most important qualities for an effective CEO?
So I've been chief executive twice and also been an executive director. So I've got 20 odd years of being an executive.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd think, wouldn't you, the higher up you go, the more you're kind of on your own and you're making decisions and you're leading the way and you're leading from the front. Actually, the higher up you go, the more you need to listen.
Yeah.
Your radar's got to be really, really wide. You've got to be on top of what people are telling you. It's got to inform your strategy. So the most important things I've learned about being a chief executive is to listen.
Yeah.
So listening and getting feedback is only ever going to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd start off, and we've talked about the customer experience. So listening to the customer and giving them what they want, whether it's giving them a new house design that they can feel comfortable with, whether it's making sure that all of the compliance is done on their home so it's as safe as possible, whether it's making sure that the rent is at a level that they can afford, whether it's making sure that you're managing the neighborhood so it's a really attractive place for people to live.
Yeah.
You'll understand more by listening to the customer. I talked about the value of staff and the teams I've worked with, and how I see people as being, they are the resource. They are the vehicle by which you are going to deliver. If you don't engage them, if you don't involve them, if you don't give them that autonomy and responsibility that goes with autonomy and the accountability that balances that, they're never going to feel 100% in ownership.
Yeah.
And when you're in 100% ownership of what you do, that's when you give your best, because you're fully engaged.
Yeah.
So you're invested in it.
Yeah, exactly.
So again, it's listening to staff who, especially people on the front line, who say, do you know what? I think there's a better way of doing this. You'd be just foolish not to listen to that. So just listening again to how you kind of just fine tuning that vehicle. I mean, if you think about being a motor mechanic.
Yeah, but
the only way
that was going into my brain process.
You are going to refine it is by listening to the engine, and when it starts purring really well, that's when you know you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
So listening to any disquiet is a way of informing strategy, and finally listening to your stakeholders.
Yeah.
So there are other areas involved. You'll regulate people who you have relationships with at local authorities, other agencies, voluntary, third-party agencies who work around you, your funders. So, your funders are only going to give you money if they feel that you're a safe bet. So you talked about communication, the importance of communication.
Yeah.
Listening is one of the most important parts of communication, but actually then feeding back to say to people, you said, I listened, and this is a response.
Yeah.
So it's that active engagement all the way. I think that's probably the most valuable lesson as CEO.
And I think kind of not just as using that at an executive level, but kind of throughout all of your career, kind of at the very start, but kind of even just starting off, even if you're not the leader, you want to be listening and communicating with your team, because yes, not every idea you put forward is correct, but you can learn from why it's incorrect, or it's just more people. Sorry.
And we never stop learning, do we?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
The one way of learning is by listening to others and the voice of experience, whether that's lived experience or learned experience. That is a really useful way of informing yourself. So never stop learning. You're never going to know everything in life, not unless you're AI.
I was just thinking that, yes, yeah. But even then, it still takes them, AI 23 days to probably learn it, or I don't know.
But even then, I do think, even at my senior years, I've got something to learn. And AI is one of the new ways out there that we can really improve services. And it'd be just daft not to learn more about it.
Oh, yes, exactly.
And some of the things it can achieve, it's just wonderful. And we really ought to, as a housing sector, we ought to be looking at this. And there's a brilliant guy up in the north at Yorkshire Housing, Nick Atkin, who absolutely leads the way in this. And, he started off before any of us did in transactions using AI, using digital channels, and he's just moving this whole agenda along the way. He's a well-known disruptor, but I think that actually that's something the sector needs.
Yeah, exactly. Exciting times for the future ahead.
Yeah.
So how would you continue to develop your professional skills, obviously after your career, during your career and kind of up to this point and kind of in the future?
Yeah, as I said, I mean, I'd use the example of AI to illustrate how you could just never stop learning. So this morning I've listened to a webinar about how AI can improve how social housing is delivered. And I listened to these wide-ranging views and I jotted it all down. Then as an experiment, I went on to ChatGPT and I typed in, how can AI improve social housing? And it literally, in the space of 3 seconds, pulled all of those opinions I'd heard in the morning
and
listed them.
You need to write it down.
And I just thought, if it can do that in a matter of seconds, what it's done, literally, I mean, AI, it's artificial in that it's analysing data that's already out there.
Yeah.
So, we need to think of ourselves as having huge data banks. We've got information about our residents. We've got information about our homes. They need to be combined. There's an awful lot of legwork to analyse that data. But if you analyse it really well, you can target services to those people and those homes that need intervention most. So it's a really effective use of your energy, your resources, and how your organisation is run. So in terms of just continuing to develop, I keep my connections to social housing very live. So I'm a NED for profit, but at the other end of the spectrum, I'm a NED for a local authority. That I sit on the Housing Improvement Board, and it's about starting from scratch. So, and I love learning. I just love learning. So I'm going along and I'm just absorbing this like this massive sponge that I am. And then I just want to go and seek out further information. And after this podcast, I'm going to be going along to that Housing Improvement Board meeting. And I'm going to just take what I learned this morning and I'm going to give it back to the Housing Improvement Board to say, how can we take this agenda further?
So you are a human being, AI, really.
Except I don't improve everything today.
No, you do. So could you please give me your kind of take on the current housing crisis and kind of what can be done to help? I know it's probably quite a big question to ask, but
this is one that taxes so many people, but it's so central to so many lives. So I remember going back to my work as a refuge worker, and that's, most of us grow up in a home and you don't realise how important it is that you've got this safe, warm shelter. Where you come in and you lock the door, especially on a cold winter's night, and you've put your heating on and you've got space to sit, unwind, relax, socialise. And most of us take that for granted. And I think we need to understand that homes aren't a luxury, they're a necessity.
Oh, well, especially in this British weather.
And we also need to understand that there just aren't enough of them. There aren't enough on the market side. So, they are becoming a more and more expensive commodity to purchase.
Definitely.
Now, when people can't purchase, they then are looking at alternative ways of securing housing. So that pushes more people into the already crammed place of waiting for an affordable social house. So we need to build more. We also need to have an intelligent debate on why. Now, honestly, I'm shaking my head in frustration because as part of one of my master's courses, I did housing and health. And this is more than 40 years ago that people were talking about the importance of good housing on health. Now, there's a recent study that's just come out that says, and this is only for one portion of the population, which is older people. If older people had better housing, it could save the NHS 1.5 billion annually. And that is just the older portion of society. And I don't need to remind listeners about the tragedy around Grenfell, the tragedy around Awaba Shock in Rochdale. There are other groups of people who are equally affected by poor housing. I think that conversation just needs to be a little bit more mature and less political point scoring. I think we need to have a conversation that looks at putting together in one debate,
Yeah.
housing, health, the economy.
Yeah.
And I think people then need to realise it may take a little bit longer, but we can actually unravel some of the issues that we have, and we can weave it into a better golden thread so that people have better homes,
Yeah.
the NHS is less burdened, and actually we might have something that, because we're providing infrastructure in the economy, it's good for jobs. So having this kind of just more mature debate and going beyond the 5-year cycles that we have of government. Well, I say 5-year cycles. I don't know how many prime ministers we've had in the last 10 years, but we do need some of that continuity. I think society deserves better.
Yes, definitely. And as I say, the knock-on effect, not only just for kind of the NHS, but also creating new jobs as well, which are also kind of, everyone's always looking for them. There's always people need jobs, especially kind of, I know that we're out of the recession but I'm sure we'll be another one in 5 years time or something like that. So.
We're being told by government to make better use of our data, triage data around property and people so you can target resources. I put that back and go, yeah, you need to make better use of your data as well. And you need to triage between different departments in government and just think of something that's better for everybody.
Not just one specific sector. Yeah. No, I definitely agree. Now, I can't believe the figure about how much it would save the NHS. And just for kind of the older generation, that's outstanding.
It was phenomenal. I did have to go back and check that figure. Was it 1.5 million or billion?
That's amazing. So you are currently a trustee at Leadership 2025. What made you decide to do this?
That was a seminal moment in 2020, in June, with the death of George Floyd. And I can remember really clearly that day. I think it was the day after. I was about to go for a walk, and I went, no, I can't. I've got to post something on LinkedIn. And I wrote an article just to say it's time to just stop and think about this and what it really means. It's not just another death of a Black person at the hands of police brutality in the United States. We need to think about what, as a world, we think when we see this time and time again.
Yeah.
And it did affect me. And I then realised, remember, this was right in the middle of lockdown.
Yeah.
And I can remember feeling a little bit isolated from my own network. And I recognised that isolation in my staff.
Yeah.
And I could see that it was eating at people, this whole issue. And I decided we just put down tools one afternoon. I said, we're going to talk about this.
Yeah.
Because this is really massively important. And I can see the anguish on teams around people's faces and how people are being affected by this. And we talked about it. We talked about it really openly. We had a cross-section. We have a cross-section at that time of people in the organisation from different ethnic backgrounds, different ages, a mixture, genders, a mixture of sexuality. We had people with disabilities. So we had representation from a lot of marginalised communities.
Yeah.
And once we started talking about George Floyd, and once we started talking about it openly, and I said, look, there are no dumb questions here.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it, because the more we talk about this, the more, as you know, if we are representative of society, the more we'll understand each other.
Yeah. Definitely.
And that was a reason that really sparked my interest. And that went on, we had a series of talks. So we talked about George Floyd, and then we had a series of Let's Talk About, and we covered a number of issues such as sexuality, such as disability, such as mental health. And it's just being open and discussing it. And I think it was probably that year or the year after that Leadership 2025 had positions available as trustees.
Yeah.
And there was a competition for them. And I threw my hat in the ring and thought, yeah, I'd like to be part of this. I'd like to be part of the movement that helps accelerate this agenda, having been, housing sector professional of now 30 years plus. So I've seen this go round and round.
Yeah.
And I want to just push this agenda along. And I succeeded in gaining one of the places as a trustee. And it's just been an eye-opener how much there is to do.
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, because I think there's always so much to do, and there will forever be so much to do. But I think it is in the starting, well, just past the kind of starting point, and it's good that a lot more people are kind of noticing and kind of implementing diversity and inclusion, and kind of, well, last week was Mental Health Awareness Week as well, so it is slowly getting there.
I think you're right. I think there is a thaw, and I think people, especially amongst younger people, there is much more acceptance of difference.
Yeah.
So, we talk about diversity, but let's look to the younger generation who really are able to look at issues with a much more objective eye than perhaps older people do. And we are creatures of our nurture. So we can see around us, society is changing. People are challenging stereotypes. They are challenging norms, and they're challenging tropes. So we are in the throes of change. And I just want to be part of creating that much more equal society.
Yeah.
And that's what Leadership 2025 is trying to do. It's saying, hey, look, there's a lot of talented people here from different backgrounds, diverse backgrounds. They could help your organisation grow, flourish, better engage, and ultimately be more successful. Hey, what not to like?
Exactly. Success. Brilliant. Fantastic. Where do I sign to join? So with being in a senior position in a very male-dominated industry, how would you say this has impacted you?
I don't think I really knew what it meant when I first started. I remember when I first started as a development officer, and it involved going to sites, construction sites and site huts that were almost invariably just populated with men.
Yeah, yeah.
And remember when we started the podcast, I said I had entered my career a little later, so I was the equivalent of a mature student.
Yeah.
So I
said you love education.
So I didn't have any qualms about entering site offices where there were those pictures on the walls and just approaching them and taking them down.
Oh, fantastic.
I never felt any nervousness about doing it.
Yeah, because I guess with you being kind of slightly older, you've gained that extra confidence in life.
I was never challenged either. So I take them down, I tear them up, I put them in the bin, and no one ever said anything. And I think they just accepted me, and I just accepted me doing it.
Yeah.
But when I think back, I think it was to do with my upbringing. And I can remember as a little girl being asked, well, what is it you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, I know, I'd like to be a racing car driver or an airline pilot.
Fun.
We are talking a long time ago.
But some people, I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do as a child. My sister wanted to be an astronaut. She did what did she do? She did natural sciences at university and something else for a master's, which I can't remember. So she kind of went off in that direction. Didn't have a clue. So at least you had some idea.
But I didn't have any gender-controlled ideas of what I should be doing.
Yeah.
And I can remember my mum and dad they just didn't see gender as a barrier.
Oh, yeah.
It was never a barrier. It was just, well, why can't you be that?
Exactly. Why can't you be a policeman or a fireman?
Never heard them say, it's not a job for a girl, though.
Yeah.
So I think that upbringing stayed with me, and I never thought anything was beyond me as a woman.
Yeah, which is how it should be.
And how it should be. And now I encourage that. I extend that hand to other women.
Yeah.
So I help them feel comfortable in that setting, especially when I was coming in through the development world. And I saw a lot of competent, capable women. And I would just kind of invisibly stand by their side and just champion them through.
Yeah.
So they felt they had that support to speak up.
I think there's a lot of, well, I know a lot of women that I've recorded the podcast with have said that they did kind of at the start of their career lack the confidence, and that if someone is there kind of, even if it's just in the background supporting them, I think that can really help someone kind of pursue what
Yeah.
they actually want to do, rather than kind of just sit and in their head dream about, oh, I really would like to do that. But
And just little things can help. Where, an older, more experienced person just go, yes, I think that's right,
yeah. Hmm.
Jane, Jenny, Jitinder. And it just makes you think, oh, thank you. It confirms, it affirms your
Yes.
thinking. So just voicing that support sometimes is really important. But I think I had my internal voice was supporting me, and that's the way I was brought up.
Well, it's
The
doing
airline's like
extremely
that.
well. Maybe slightly different like you are now, but you never know. I'm sure you still could do it if you wanted to. So,
Let's see.
so why do you think that diversity inclusion is such an important topic of discussion?
Okay, so we talked about customers and service earlier.
Yeah.
So by listening to your customers, you're providing what people want. You're getting it right more likely than not first time.
Yeah.
So it's actually a really good, effective way of working. It's what the market would call good business.
Yeah.
There's a McKinsey report that kind of makes the same point about diversity.
Yeah.
And has said that those organisations with more diverse senior teams tend to outperform financially those who have less diverse senior teams.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I haven't done any personal research
So
myself, but I can see where.
it makes a good business. And the reason why is because when you're opening up your organisation
Mhm.
to a wider group, it's inevitable that you're actually also opening it up to a wider group of talent,
Yeah,
skills, and experience. So
exactly.
you are actually making your organization really, really strong by getting the very best rather than restricting yourselves to a tiny group. So if you
Mhm.
think about 100 years ago, it was much more difficult for women.
Yeah,
So, the world was not benefiting from 50% of the population.
Mhm.
And that is how I see diversity, is that if you open up your doors to everybody,
yeah,
you're actually going to feel the benefit. It's another kind of what's not to like
yeah,
moment.
exactly. It's like, well, why can't we involve everyone? Then we can get ideas from every background, every sexuality, everyone. Then we're more likely to get a successful, cheaper product.
And
Products is what you're
and
making.
I think the word is successful. You'd like to be more successful. So if you're successful, you can then branch out in other areas. So, don't worry about losing your job because somebody else is going to take it. Maybe your organization will just grow in different ways and there'll be much more for your organization to do.
Yeah,
And, you're more likely to wither on the vine if you just use the same old soil again and again. It does lose its effectiveness.
yeah.
You do need to sometimes just get that extra richness in. And that's
Fresh
what
set of
diversity
eyes.
can bring.
So, how do you think the industry must improve its diversity efforts in the future? Obviously, it is an ongoing process.
Yeah, I think that organizations probably need to really examine themselves on a cellular level
Hmm.
and ask themselves really honestly, are we doing everything we can
Yeah.
in this area?
Hmm.
And also to kind of reframe the question. So don't ask it in a way of, what are we going to lose if we embrace diversity? But
Look at the positives.
what are we going
Glass
to
half full.
get
Yeah.
if we do embrace diversity? What could the changes be? How could we grow? How could we become more successful? What's what does that mean? What does that look like? And I think if you actually reframe it in that way and say, what am I going to get out of this? I might get better customer service. I might get better representation. I'm certainly going to grow my talent pool.
Yeah.
I'm going to become an organization where people want to work. Where people want to work, you have a lot more productivity. So you're likely to be that much more successful. Framing it in that way to say that diversity also brings about a cultural shift that will benefit your staff, it will benefit your customers, it will benefit wider society. Seeing it in that way, I think recognizing it in that way and then following that trail back to go, okay, so that's where I'd like to be. If that is in 4 years' time, where do I need to be in 3? Where do I need to be in 2? Where do I need to be in 1? And it may be little things, I'm trying to sort of link as many things as I can, but, maybe looking at AI and saying to AI, how can I draft a job recruitment pack that's really going to appeal to a diverse pool of candidates?
Yeah.
And actually, just doing that kind of sentiment analysis around what people are looking for in their jobs. That might be just a starting point, but I've only just heard one webinar, so what do I know?
Now, 23 days, you'll know everything.
But yeah, it's just having that real examination and taking the fear away of what it is you're going to lose if you do diversity and inclusion. Instead, thinking of it as not a nice to have, but a fundamental building block of a really good staff culture, a really good customer service, and a really good place where governance and social value come together.
Yeah, definitely. And as you say, if you kind of break it down into stages, the bigger picture won't seem as scary to get to. And as I say, it's all a process. We will get there.
A bright young man gave me this sentence. He did say, it's called chunking down the elephant. You can't eat a whole elephant in one go, but if you chunk it down, and I'm a vegetarian, so that's not a very good simile.
Oh my gosh, oh brilliant. And so kind of on the flip side of that, what would you say are the long-term consequences if we ignore or fail to recognise diversity inclusion at work? I know obviously you kind of mentioned being successful. To be successful, we do need to obviously make sure that we make sure our companies are diverse.
Yeah. So I think if we don't, then I think we're going to be papering over the cracks.
Yes.
And I think we're going to lose out on the opportunity that is out there at the moment to improve.
Yeah.
And I think diversity is one of the most important parts of changing culture.
Yeah.
So the regulator is saying, we will know how good an organisation you are from your culture.
Yeah, and culture is such a big thing.
It won't be from your TSNs.
Yeah.
It won't be from the data that you give us. They've said that we'll recognise when we talk to frontline staff, when we talk to some of your customers, we will know immediately whether you've got that culture right. And I think being open to diversity and inclusion and equality, again, what's not to like, is a real fundamental part of a culture that is fair and transparent and respectful. I don't think an organisation that isn't diverse, inclusive and equal is likely to be fair and respectful. I think you are more likely to be a fair, respectful, customer-focused organisation if you have already embedded those values of celebrating diversity, being welcoming and including people, and offering that opportunity for people to have the same outcomes. I think they go hand in hand. So if culture's so important to our regulator and in recognising that we're going to get good customer service, see equality, diversity and inclusion as a really easy way to kind of kickstart getting that culture in.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it doesn't matter what size the business is, whether it be an SME or kind of an international business. Obviously it's probably slightly harder the larger the business it gets, it does get harder. But then that's when they need to take even more focus onto diversity and inclusion, because they have a larger kind of impact as a business and how many customers that they deal with as well. So therefore,
And having good, well embedded values of respect and fairness for your customer is going to be more likely to happen where people really believe in this. So I'm not a baker, but I don't know, I see equality, diversity and inclusion as a yeast in bread.
yeah.
I know yeast does something to really important.
Right. That's it, right.
And it won't work without yeast. And I think
Yeah.
you see EDI as the yeast of your culture.
Definitely. Definitely.
That's mixing way too many metaphors.
We've got an elephant, we've got bread. What else? So would you describe yourself as a risk taker? And if you do, could you describe some of the risks you've taken throughout your career and the results of those?
Yeah. So I think I would describe myself as a natural risk taker. I have a entrepreneurial nature, but having worked in a highly regulated sector, I have always carefully evaluated risk. And I've always managed or mitigated it by having a lovely big safety net.
Yes.
So I will take risks, but I do manage them as much as I can. And I also make people who I'm working with, the boards I work with, aware of those risks. So ultimately, it's a decision for the board to make. And the board can only make effective decisions if they've got all of the data.
Yes.
So provide as much of the data, provide as much of the solution as possible, and then work to make it happen. So that's pretty much how I approach it. Having said that, the biggest risk probably wasn't related to any kind of project or work, but probably my career. So I think when I was a group director, we were in another merger and the avenue was open to carry on being a group director, but in a much bigger organization. And I just thought, no, I still have that desire to influence an organization's culture and values at the highest level, working alongside a board.
Yeah.
And just making sure you get a really customer focused culture. That whole idea of the annual tenant conference, but translated across an organization. And I decided, no, I'm going to pursue a chief executive role. And that was probably the biggest risk I took in my career, but it's one that I've never regretted because it did work. I was able to work at a level where I could cascade that values of treating people with respect, valuing your customer, working well with your colleagues and enjoying your job.
Exactly. And if you enjoy your job, then you're only more motivated and kind of empowered to do even better and help the people around you as well. And hopefully they'll feel the same so you can be as successful as possible.
Exactly.
So is there any changes that you would like to bring to the industry at all?
Any changes that I would like to bring to the industry? I think that going back to having a very much more mature approach and, if the politicians aren't going to weave all the threads together, if they're not going to join all the dots, I think we as a sector need to join hands with other sectors like health.
Yes, definitely.
And economic regeneration and make a really irresistible case to say a long-term view of how we deliver social housing for the nation, for the nation's economy, for the nation's health is a responsibility that we can't shy away from. As housing professionals, we have that data. We need to look across to our health colleagues in that profession and work together and make joint approaches to government to say national health is one of the building blocks of British society. It's respected across the world, and I think we owe it the respect to make sure that it stands up for another 70 odd years.
Definitely. And the fact that I think, well, with anything, with diversity, inclusion, or with kind of the government with this, it's just educating them so they know, as you say, the facts, not just within the housing sector, but in the health and how it is a knock-on effect to each of these sectors. And just by helping out one will help the others. It's just, you do have to kind of hold hands, as you say, and just go, right, this is...
Come on, Caitlin, let's go to Westminster now. Let's knock on Dear Father's door.
So kind of looking back at your career, is there anything that you would like to change at all? You don't need to say yes, there is.
There is probably one area I look back on it fondly, but I can remember I'd only just started as a group director. And I think after a couple of years, my then chief executive would leave notes about chief executive jobs on my desk.
So there's subtle hints.
And what he was doing was, obviously, he was showing his faith and confidence in me to be a chief executive. But I absolutely adored working with him. It was one of the best times of my life, and I didn't leave until he retired.
Because you just enjoyed it that much?
Because I enjoyed it so much. And yes, maybe I could have listened to him and taken up the post of chief executive earlier.
Yeah.
However, what I got are some treasured memories of working in that organisation and working with him, and the joy of working with him and how much I learnt from him. Yeah. So on balance, I think probably the memories are worth more than starting as chief executive earlier.
And
so no,
it's not like you didn't become one. So. Exactly. Staying there for the enjoyment. And if it was still challenging you, and you had to say you were still learning new things, and
he was forever giving me new things to do. Literally, he would throw things at me. I think you need to have a go at this, and I think you'll just keep it engaged, don't you? See how good he was.
Yeah, exactly. But then at the same time, he was also giving you subtle hints. What do you want me to do? Well, thank you very much, Jitinder, for being on the podcast today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Caitlin. It's been my pleasure to be here too.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the GSC Executives Podcast. Today's conversation was hosted and recorded by Caitlin Ty, with editing and production managed by Stephen Smith. The podcast is produced by GSC Executives in conjunction with Daniel Owen Limited. For more details about our executive search solutions, as well as upcoming episodes, please visit our website, gscexecutives.co.uk. If you're keen to hear more industry insights, please consider subscribing on your preferred podcast platform. Until next time, continue to lead with excellence.